All right, let's begin. Today's briefing will be a strategic analysis of the uprising in the north, focusing specifically on its immediate operational and strategic consequences.
Just so we're clear, this entire briefing is based on the doctrinal analysis from the Batallas Guerra Civil project, which was compiled by Colonel F.J. Victor Rodrigo. Everything we'll cover comes directly from that source. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with General Mola's initial plan, then review the order of battle as it stood. From there, we'll analyze the results of the uprising and assess the new strategic situation. After that, we'll look at some key factors that shaped the campaign and finish up with an overview of its subsequent phases. Okay, first up, let's dig into the initial strategic concept for the uprising in the north, exactly as it was conceived by General Mola. So this lays out Mola's initial intent, and it was a very clear, multi-pronged plan. He tasked the 6th Organic Division out of Burgos with maintaining order in its own territory and, this is the key part, sending a column straight from Madrid. For the Asturias Military Command, the objective was simple: control the mining basin and the port of Mosel. The 8th Division in La Coruña was ordered to secure its region and then reinforce Asturias. Meanwhile, Navarra had to secure its province, guard the Ebro crossings, and also send another column towards Madrid. Now, Mola's intel expected some serious resistance in the Asturias mining basin, maybe in Bilbao too, but he really didn't anticipate major problems anywhere else. So, with the plan established, let's now turn to the disposition of forces. What did both sides actually have on the board in July of 1936? This gives you a detailed order of battle. The whole area falls under two main commands, the 6th and 8th Organic Divisions, plus that independent Asturias Military Command. You'll notice a significant army presence, right? We've got infantry, artillery, cavalry regiments spread across key garrisons like Burgos, Pamplona, and La Coruña. But here's the crucial point. Look at the sheer number of public order forces. We're talking 23 companies of Guardia Civil, 11 of Asalto, and 15 of Carabineros in the 6th region alone. The 8th region and Asturias add another 20 Guardia Civil, 12 Asalto, and 10 Carabineros companies on top of that. These forces, often with higher readiness than the army units who were on summer leave, were going to be absolutely decisive in the first few hours of the uprising. Okay, so we've moved from planning to execution. Let's break down the tactical outcomes of the uprising, province by province. And this map just illustrates the mixed results perfectly. The uprising was an immediate, resounding success in the nationalist heartland. Burgos, Navarra, Oliva, and Palencia were secured almost instantly. Over in Galicia, there was some initial resistance in La Coruña and Ferrol, but the whole region fell under nationalist control by the end of July. But, and this is a big but, Mola's plan hit some critical setbacks right where he least expected them. In Guipúzcoa and Santander, the public order forces stayed loyal to the government and the uprising failed completely. Same thing happened in Vizcaya. Then you have Asturias, which developed into a really unique situation. The uprising failed across the province, but Colonel Aranda managed to seize the capital, Oviedo, creating this isolated nationalist pocket that would become a major focus of the entire campaign. So, having looked at the tactical results, let's now analyze the new strategic landscape that emerged from all of this initial action. What the uprising created was this strategic reality, a long, isolated, Republican-held territory right along the coast, what became known as the Reducto Cantabrico. It was a real prize. It had significant ports, industry, and a large population, but it was totally cut off from the main Republican zone. So for the nationalists, the immediate strategic objective was to seize Irun and sever this zone's land connection with France. A secondary but very urgent objective was to relieve their besieged garrisons in Oviedo. For the Republicans, the priorities were basically the mirror image: crush the isolated pockets in Oviedo and Gijón, and then try to break out to the south or east to link up with their other forces. Now, beyond the situation on the ground, there were several key factors that really shaped this campaign. Let's take a look at the domains of sea, air, and political military command. The strategic environment was heavily, and I mean heavily, influenced by sea and air power. With the naval base at El Ferrol in their hands, the nationalists had immediate and decisive naval superiority in the Cantabrian Sea. Simple as that. This let them control the maritime lines of communication and blockade the Republican zone. In the air, well, both sides started with very few aircraft, but the nationalists had a huge geographical advantage. The plains of Castile gave them plenty of space for airfields. In contrast, the mountainous terrain of the Republican-held strip made building suitable air bases extremely difficult. And this right here, this might just be the most decisive factor of all: the stark contrast in command and control. The nationalists established a unified structure almost immediately. The declaration of a state of war put all power in military hands, centralized under the Junta de Defensa Nacional in Burgos, and, for this theater, under Mola's Army of the North. On the other hand, the Republican war effort was completely fragmented. The central government treated the situation as a public order problem, which led to a decentralized, highly politicized command structure. The North effectively became a series of independent cantons. You had Vizcaya and Guipúzcoa, Santander and Asturias, each running its own war. This, of course, severely hampered any kind of unified strategic action.
Finally, let's outline how the conflict in this theater evolved over time. We can break it down into a few distinct operational phases.
The war in the North really played out in three main phases. First was the preliminary phase. This was characterized by improvised columns, a lot of localized fighting, mostly centered on the siege of Oviedo. Then came the first phase, which saw the first organized nationalist operations. This was the drive to cut the French border at Irún and the first attempt to relieve Oviedo, which resulted in the capture of Guipúzcoa and the creation of that very thin Oviedo corridor. The second phase was more of a stabilization period, though the pressure on Oviedo never really let up. And finally, the third phase. This was the major, systematic nationalist campaign to liquidate the front entirely, with successive, large-scale operations against Vizcaya, Santander, and finally, Asturias.
And that concludes our strategic overview. The key takeaway here is pretty clear. An initially sound operational plan was fundamentally changed by the realities on the ground and by critical asymmetries in command structure. This created a distinct and ultimately decisive theater of war. For a more granular analysis of these operations, personnel are directed to the source at www.batallasguerracivil.es.